Party. The president's new policy on young undocumented immigrants is making things even worse for the GOP. They don't know which way to turn. Watch how Mitt Romney and how many times Mitt Romney avoided a direct question about the policy on CBS yesterday.
Would you repeal this order if you became president?
Well, let's step back and look at the issue. I mean, first of all, we have to secure the border. I don't know why he feels stopgap measures are the right way to go.
Well, what would you do about it?
Well, as you know, he was president for the last 3.5 years, did nothing on immigration.
But would you repeal this?
Well, it would be overtaken by events, if you will, by virtue of my putting in place a long-term solution.
Would you leave this in place while you worked out a long-term solution, or would you just repeal it?
We'll look at that. We'll look at that setting as we reach that.
This is a far cry from the direct answer Mitt Romney gave about the DREAM Act on the campaign trail.
The question is, if I were elected and Congress were to pass the DREAM Act, would I veto it? And the answer is yes.
How can you blame kids when they're dragged to the USA from wherever? If you're a fair person, you can't.
I think it's a sensible policy. I think it would be much better if that were the law of the land.
Romney has a big hole to dig out of, because if he gets under, say, the 31% of Hispanic voters that McCain got, he's going to lose.
You're also talking about people that came over at 16 years of age. I mean, at that point, you had a say in it, and that looks kind of more like amnesty.
Do you think a 16-year-old whose parents are coming across the border has a say in whether or not they're just going to stay behind in their country and let their parents?
Well, they're certainly in a position to have a conversation with their parents about it.
A 16-year-old is in a position to have a conversation with their parents about coming across the border, you think?
Believe me, my 16-year-old daughter has given me some input on everything that, pretty much everything the family wants to do.
Look, I mean, when I hear Romney say that we haven't done anything, what about December 2010? The House of Representatives passed the DREAM Act, 216 to 198. 208 Democrats and 8 Republicans. The very next week in the Senate, what was it? It was 55 votes for cloture. 51 Democrats, 4 Republicans. There were Republican senators who had been co-sponsors of the DREAM Act that wouldn't vote for cloture. And then they say we haven't been trying. Look, what the president's action is a reflection of the will of the nation, of both House of Representatives and the Senate. And he has freed 800,000 people. His promise, and the promise that I made along with Senator McCain and Kennedy and Congressman Flake, who's now running for the Senate in the state of Arizona, we introduced bipartisan, bicameral legislation for comprehensive immigration reform in 2004. And what did we say? We want to bring people out of the shadows. Look, Ed, wait for 2 months down the road, when tens of thousands of people make lines, young people, smart people, Americans, when people start talking to them and seeing the people in the lines, and you see them getting their work permits and their work documents, wait till that. This is, for the Latino community, a real civil rights issue of bringing people fairness and making the Justice Department and our system respect their family values. Just wait till those kids line up and you see the happiness. America is a country that loves its children. And these are children. Well, this argument that 16-year-olds make decisions, let me just tell you, that's the extreme point. Most of the kids I met today, Ed, were 9 months old and 2 years old and 3 and 4 years old when they came to this country. But even if they were 15 years and 364 days, I was that age. If my dad said we're going, that's where we were going. And you followed your parents' lead. They didn't have a choice in this matter. They're here in this country. We should embrace them.
Oh, you know, it's very important to remember that the president acted because he couldn't get action from the Republicans in Congress. It's so hypocritical.
This is Harry Reid on the Senate floor today. He made that point. Here it is.
I was stunned listening to the Republican nominee for president say, why doesn't Congress do this? Mr. President, we've tried. We can't get Republican votes.
I mean, Senator Reid was absolutely right. And the other thing that's been very interesting to watch now, Ed, is Mitt Romney is in a kind of straitjacket. When you have Marco Rubio going out and saying, maybe this really isn't very unfair to send these kids back when, they had no choice in coming, and they've been great students. I mean, we've invested so much in a lot of these kids as Americans, to keep them here is great for the country. But Mitt Romney made a calculated decision to move to the right during the primaries, baiting Rick Perry for having the Texas version of the DREAM Act. And now he's got to live with it. And that's why you've got him with Bob Schieffer just, but 5 times, not really being able to give a straight answer.
It's a running theme on this show. The question is, will the real Mitt Romney please stand up? Once again, we can't find the guy.
The question is, if I were elected and Congress were to pass the DREAM Act, would I veto it? And the answer is yes.